Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 302 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron. I'm so glad that you're here today as I am talking to Rudy Ruiz, who was fantastic to speak to. And we talked a little bit about how to open yourself to edits and the editing process and what that means for all of us. And you know that it is one of my favorite things to talk about. So please stay tuned for that. Little bit of an update about what is going on around here. It has felt like a very, very busy week. A lot of things to do. And then yesterday when I woke up, it was Wednesday morning here in New Zealand, Tuesday in the States, and I had an email from my editor saying, congratulations on the paperback release of Hush Little Baby. And I thought, what? That doesn't come out for another week, does it? No, it came out that day, yesterday. And it was a complete surprise to me. It had been March 17th. And I was not alerted that it moved, which is absolutely fine because I tend to get a little bit nervous before any book releases, even though this book has been out in hardcover. It has not been out in paperback. Paperback is what I am really excited about. A lot more affordable and gettable and exciting. So new cover, fantastic. What's been happening a lot, though, is the supply chain issues have been moving books around. What I have heard a lot of is people having their books schedule pushed back, so further or out, I guess, so further down the line. And all I can guess is perhaps somebody's book got pushed further down the line, so mine was bumped up a week. And surprise! So yesterday morning, I had woken up with the full intention of writing 3,000 words on Seven Miracles, which is the book I'm first drafting right now. And I did not. I absolutely did not. What I did was social media, and it was actually pretty fun. What happens in this particular case is that my publisher, Penguin Dutton, had already sent me a file full of graphics, and they were, the flat lay of the book and releasing now, and the book with, a quote from another author on it or a quote from a review on it. So I was putting those up there. I also spent some time over on TikTok. I really like TikTok, y'all. I really like Book Talk. So if you are interested in Book Talk, come find me over there. I'm just Rachael Herron, of course. Come follow me and see what I'm doing. But I was talking up Hush Little Baby, which it was, post Mother's Day weekend. And Hush Little Baby is a mother-daughter story at its core. It's an own voices queer story about a recovering alcoholic who, you know what? I never do this. I just decided to do this. I'm going to read you the back of the book. Honestly, I don't even know what's on the back of the book. I literally don't. So let's do this together, shall we? Oh my gosh, this is gonna be fun. Okay, the front of it, I will describe it for people who are not watching on the video. It has a scary picture of a darkened house that might be like a dollhouse resting in front of some blue and white curtains. There's something resting next to the dollhouse, and I, honest to God, do not know what it is. It looks like maybe a pair of earrings or a broken something. I've been trying to figure that out for a while. Hush Little Baby is what it's called. And on the front, there's a quote from Lisa Scottolini, who was on the show and is amazing. She said, "A dark, twisty, totally modern thriller that I couldn't put down." On the back, it says, "A propulsive thriller that asks how tightly we are bound to our pasts, how much we can trust those around us, and how far will a mother go to protect her child." And let me tell you that in traditional publishing, my experience has been with all of my books that I don't write the back copy. I do not write this back blurb. Thank God. The editor usually does it, and the editor usually has a little bit of distance, and so probably does a better job at it. And the author, in my experience, gets editing rights on that. Like, she'll send it to me and say, "Do you like this? Would you change anything?" She sends it to my agent, same thing. But then this is what goes on. And this was so long ago, I can't remember. So Jillian Marsh is a survivor. She escaped her toxic upbringing at the hands of her religious zealot mother, and after hitting rock bottom in her 20s due to alcoholism, she not only got sober, but built a successful marriage and medical career. Nearly a decade later, the life Jillian worked so hard for is coming apart. Her wife, Rochelle, has left her, despite Jillian's being pregnant with their child, and she feels constantly tense living alone in her house. Even her mommies-to-be group, 3 women who are now all she has left isn't the solace it once was, as secrets among the group unwillingly come to light. When Jillian's uneasiness at home escalates to tangible threats, items missing, candles lit, windows left open, she can't tell if her pregnancy is taking a psychological toll on her, or if there may be someone out there with a motive to sabotage her and her unborn child. As the circle of those she can trust continues to dwindle, Jillian knows only one thing for sure. She will do anything to protect her baby. And then from E.G. Scott, there's a quote that says, "A gripping, deftly plotted thriller and so much more, R.H. Herron delivers an unflinching meditation on womanhood, motherhood, and sisterhood." All the hoods. Hush Little Baby is a fiercely compelling must read. And then here's the bio, and I think this is interesting, so I'm going to share it with you too. R.H. Herron received her MFA in writing from Mills College, Oakland. She is the author of the thriller Stolen Things and Hush Little Baby, as well as the best-selling author under a different name of more than 24 books. And then it's got my social media stuff. They don't tell my other name, which is actually my real name, just like R.H. Herron is my real name, Rachael Herron. What else does it not say on here? Oh, I'll just point out one thing that I think is fun. Jillian is pregnant with Rochelle's baby. And that last line of the blurb that says she will do anything to protect her baby, it's a tiny bit of a spoiler. I mean, it's not a bad spoiler. It's not going to ruin anything for you because I'm sure you'll run right out and grab it. But the thing I really liked about Jillian is that she was ambivalent about her pregnancy. She didn't really want to have a baby. Her wife had tried over and over again to get pregnant and couldn't. And because they did want a kid, Jillian then offers her own body to carry the implanted embryo that it was made with her wife's egg. So the child inside her body is not, it is hers, it's inside her body, but it's also her wife's DNA. And then her wife leaves her. And interestingly, I think I mentioned this recently, that, sorry, as I move around in my chair, I had written this originally as a straight heterosexual book, hated it. I think the whole first draft may have been heterosexual. So of course it was her baby. And I was really not feeling the het relationship. So I asked my editor if I could make them gay. And then that presented itself to me because I thought that was a much more interesting and compelling idea. What happens when you are carrying your wife's child and then you separate? I contacted a California adoption marriage lawyer to talk about this, which was hilarious, actually. I had reached out to a couple of lawyers. I didn't want to pay anybody. I was just, trying to get an okay semblance of verisimilitude, really. Like, is this completely beyond the pale? Is this law absolutely backwards? So I didn't get any, ridiculous mail. But this one called me right back immediately. And he was also a writer. So he wanted to talk about writing, which was really fun. He actually sent me his book. It was adorable. And he's thanked in the acknowledgments, of course, because we always thank people like that. And he explained how that would work in California. And where am I going with this? This book is now on tables in a bookstore near you, hopefully. And I am excited about it. And I want to be really open about that. I'm excited about this book coming out. This is, I can say with confidence, this is the best book I ever wrote. It truly is. My wife, who never pulls punches with me in what she thinks, also thinks this is the best book I have ever written. She would tell me if it wasn't. I can feel that. But I also want to point out that it has not sold well in hardcover. It was a hardcover in a pandemic when people were not going to bookstores. It has sold probably the worst of all of my books ever in hardcover. So the fact that it gets another shot at life in paperback form, this book that I love so much, that was really my first time putting a queer main character in Stolen Things. One of the 3 main characters, the daughter, is gay. Is she bisexual? I can't remember. I think she's gay. But this is a single point of view book, and it's with a lesbian narrator. And I really love that. And also I got to work in my own recovery in here. And the thing I like about the recovery that is in this book is that this is not a book about recovery. This is a book about an alcoholic in recovery who happens to have some things happening to her and around her, and very scary things. And parts of her past and perhaps a large mistake that she made is coming back to haunt her. But it's not about alcoholism. It's not about addiction. However, addiction is a part of her personality, just like it is mine. So I don't know. I really love this book. If you've never read one of my books, go read this one. Why don't you? And then tell me how you feel about it. I'm very proud of it. And I think it's scary and funny and sweet. And it is about the mother-daughter relationship. This is where I was going. Full circle here. So I spent the day yesterday on social media talking about the mother-daughter relationship. And I decided that I would show the book. I would say that it was out. And then I spent the rest of the day telling four or five stories about my mother-daughter experiences. I don't have kids. I don't have that to write about, but I do have a goddaughter, and I did have the best mother in the world, and that is my core story. The mother-daughter experience is my core story. That, along with Chosen Family, and this is a book about both. So it was fun to put those TikToks out. I cross-posted them to Instagram. You can follow me over there. You can see what I did if you are interested in that. And other than that, I've just got my fingers crossed. Oh, if you are in New Zealand, there are some New Zealand listeners here. I do have a launch party scheduled for the 28th of June. So it's not for another 6 weeks or so, but it will be at Unity Bookstore in Wellington, which is such an amazing bookstore. So that is where the launch will be. It's on I think it's a Tuesday night, 28th of June. So please come if you are in the area. I would really love to meet you. Also, I'm terrified that nobody will show up. I'm sure that I will mention that again. All right, what else is going on? Like I said, I'm writing 7 Miracles. I'm about 28,000 words into the book now. I threw out the first 27,000 words that I had written because I had gone. Here's what happened. I was trying to go the commercial route, and I decided not to. And now I'm just going the fun route. I'm writing what I want to write, and I may regret that. I don't, that was flip of me to say. I know that I will not regret that because I'm writing this to please myself. That's it. And then I will get it published in some way, shape, or form. My agent has the memoir. She is going to read it soon, and then she will take it out, and either she will sell it or she won't, and then I will self-publish the memoir. So just a lot of irons in the fire, having a lot of fun. And the migraine that was plaguing me last week has been cleared up with a new, very simple medication. Apparently I was having histamine migraine. So just being back on antihistamines has really fixed that. So I feel a lot better and stronger. And yeah, just thrilled to be writing. I've already done 3,000 words, and it is not even 11 a.m. here yet. So that's fantastic. And in a few minutes, I'm going to go join Rachel Says Write and do some more writing. So, yeah. All right. Now I just feel like I'm babbling. Let's get into the interview with Rudy Ruiz. Here is his bio. Rudy Ruiz is a writer of literary fiction, a native of the U.S. Mexico border. His earliest works were published at Harvard, where he studied literature, creative writing, government, and public policy, earning bachelor's and master's degrees. In 2017, Rudy Ruiz was awarded the Gulf Coast Prize in Fiction. In 2020, he was a finalist for both the Texas Institute of Letters Best Short Story Award, as well as the Texas Observer's annual short story contest. In 2020, Blackstone Publishing released Ruiz's novel, The Resurrection of Fulgencio Ramirez. The novel received critical acclaim and multiple awards and was named one of the top 10 best first novels of 2020 by the American Library Association's Booklist. Please enjoy this fabulous interview with Rudy. Please be getting a little bit of your own writing done, just a little bit. We'll get the books done, and come find me online where I am and tell me about them. And I wish you happy writing. Well, hello there, Rudy.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have you on the show. Will you please give us your full name and your pronouns?
Yes, it's Rudy Ruiz, and it's he, his, him, or he, him, his.
Thank you very much. I have been so excited to talk to you for very selfish reasons, honestly, because my next book that I'm diving into is magical realism, which has always been a favorite of mine, and I've never written it before. So this is going to be new, and we'll get to the questions that I sent you. I'm sure we will, but I kind of want to throw a curveball at you right here at the top and ask you, so is there any crossover in your mind with you being a border native and writing about life on the border, is there any connection to magical realism in your brain somehow?
I mean, I feel like very much the answer would be yes. When I first read magical realism, it was in college, and I immediately connected to the writing style, and it felt like a cultural connection to it. I mean,
Yeah.
part of it may have been I was reading, some Latin American authors like Gabriel
Marquez and
Garcia
Allende
Marquez,
and yeah.
right, Isabel Allende. But I also was fortunate enough to have learned Spanish when I was growing up, so I actually got to read them in Spanish as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was just a really deep cultural connection, and I felt like, oh, I'd always known I wanted to be a writer, but when I read that style, I thought I just need to write this, style. And there's something about living on the border, growing up on a border and crossing that border regularly, that I feel like almost like trains your mind and your heart to be open to possibilities and fluidity and
Yeah.
breaking barriers. And magical realism does that so poetically, and I was just drawn to that.
That is kind of what I wondered if you would say, or you could have said, no, I don't even understand how those are connected. But there is something so beautiful to me about that liminal state of border crossing and crossing the borders of imagination and genre and playing with all of that. Yeah, that's
I love that question. And yeah, it's like the thing about magical realism is in that style, you cross those borders so seamlessly and effortlessly and naturally. They are not seen really as impossible or supernatural. And that's very much how you cross the border daily when I was growing up. It wasn't as overly militarized,
yeah.
or fenced off as it is nowadays. And it felt like a very natural way of life.
I love that. That's gorgeous. I not recently because I haven't been too many places in the States for a while now, but I recently flew over part of the border and I think it was above kind of some parts of Texas. And it was astonishing the line of demarcation that is there now. Like there's you can see all the things that we didn't. I was raised in California and also crossing the border just fluidly, and that just doesn't happen anymore. Where do you
It's
live
really
now?
sad. I live in San Antonio, Texas, with my
Okay.
wife and my kids. One of our kids is already a grown up, so she's actually she lives in the Boston area, but our son is in high school and he lives here with us, and so here we are, not that far from the border, close
Yeah.
enough that it's still very much part of similar culture.
Yeah. Okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? When, how, where are you getting all of this done? Talk to us about the actual physical process of doing it.
Yeah, well, I when I'm writing and I'm deep into, a project, I usually tend to like to take advantage of the mornings. My mind feels very fresh and eager,
Yeah.
and uncluttered, kind of after the morning coffee. And so I have this little kind of writer's artist studio space in the house that I share with my wife, who's a designer and artist
Ah.
herself. So we have this nice big table where we have kind of like, remember the game Battleship, where you would face off. We have our iMacs like kind of back to back, and so we can both be creative in here and work. And I like to just kind of come in here and focus for a couple hours. If I can get 2 good productive hours in the morning of fresh writing, then the afternoon I might be doing editing. Sometimes if I'm really on a roll, I'll take a break for that kind of lunch or whatever to clear the mind, and then come back and do another good 2-hour session in the afternoon. But that's typically what I try to keep it to. I try to keep my
Yeah.
stuff in years past. I used to, burn the midnight oil and toil all night and everything. But I kind of found that was a little too, kind of too unbalanced for me. It kind of starts sacrificing too much of your family life and your personal life. So I try to keep it in balance, and only if I'm like on a total tear and I'm totally inspired and I have to go back after dinner, then I'll put in another, hour or two. But I try to minimize that.
Or if you're on terrible deadline, of course, that's when all my rules go out the window. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
deadline. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you work with near battleship-esque with your wife. So when we were moving to New Zealand, my wife and I were moving around, staying in mostly Airbnbs. And so we had to like share the one tiny table that they would have. And I really thought it would be awful to be a writer in the room with somebody else. And it wasn't. It was actually okay for me to do. How do you find that? Does she distract you? Is it a good distraction? How does that feel? I'm fascinated.
It's a great distraction. It's a lifelong distraction.
Yes.
I think it's the writing that's more of the distraction, to be honest. But
I love that.
I think for the most part, my wife, her name is Heather. She knows when I'm really like I guess in deep, and she's a writer as well, so she very much respects that and kind of tries not to get me off track. So that's great, and she'll have her own work, so we'll kind of get immersed. We'll put our headphones on or our AirPods, and I'll listen to certain type of music to try to get kind of in the mood, inspired and transported elsewhere. So it works really, really nicely.
AirPods are the best thing that have ever been invented with the noise canceling. It is
I know. I can't believe how good it is.
It's incredible. It saved my life several times this year. What are you listening to when you are writing?
Well, it really depends on the book. I've found that different, types of music will kind of get me in a different kind of mood. So, which makes sense. In my recent novel, The Resurrection of Fulgencio Ramirez, it's set kind of in the parts of it are set in the 1950s on the border. And so the music I listened to was the songs that the character actually sings in the story. The character sings a lot of classic Mexican songs from that age. They're called boleros, and they're like love songs. Oh yeah, so you're familiar with them. They're love songs. They're usually sung by like a trio or maybe sometimes mariachis, but sometimes it's just a trio. It's three musicians playing the guitar, singing these beautiful love songs. And so that's what I listened to mostly when I was working on that book, because it's a romantic story, and the character sings those songs, and they kind of chart the journey that he goes through of falling in love and heartbreak and redemption and reconciliation and so forth.
Oh, that's perfect. I think I read in your press materials that you're working on Fulgencio's prequel. Is that right?
Yes, the new novel.
Prequel, is Fulgencio in it, or is it other people?
Fulgencio's not in it, but there are some of the smaller characters that come back, and I explore them a little bit more. In The Resurrection of Fulgencio Ramirez, Fulgencio is saddled with this family curse that has haunted the men in his family for generations. And in this prequel, Valley of Shadows, which is coming out in September, it's set out in West Texas in the 1880s. And it's one of Fulgencio's ancestors who is the protagonist. And so he's actually the first generation that carries the curse, and is also, he fled his home and fled out to West Texas to try to escape the curse, but it's kind of hard. So some of the characters that appear are characters that in flashbacks had small parts in the Fulgencio novel.
That's so cool. But you're going hardcore, deep historical, whereas before it was the 50s and the 80s. I want to say no, 50s and the.
Yes, with Fulgencio, it was set in the 50s and the 80s, and a little bit in the 2000s. And in this one, it's really the 1880s, and then going back to 1860s. And 1848, which is when the U.S. Mexico War ended and the Rio Grande became designated the border between the two countries. And so that's when that's sort of when the curse begins on the family.
So now I have to ask, what are you listening to for this book? Is it still boleros or something else?
I've tried to listen to music that gets me in the mood, like kind of like I'm almost feeling like I'm watching a Western movie.
There's
So
some
it's
good
kind of
soundtracks
interesting.
out right now, I bet, for that.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
listened to some soundtracks from Westerns, listen to just instrumental guitar that kind of has a little bit of that
Yeah.
Western twang, feel. And that kind of gets me in the mood. Sometimes lyrics can kind of distract my mind from writing a little bit. So I like to listen to instrumental, guitar work for that. And it has worked. It kind of gets me into that feeling of being immersed in that different time.
That's awesome. I love hearing what people are listening to. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to writing?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I
It's a big one.
mean, gosh, I mean, I think for me it's two. One is always like believing in yourself. I mean, it's always, I think most writers and artists I talk to always struggle with that. Is just you go through times when you just wonder if you're good enough, if the work is good enough,
Yeah.
those kind of things. And then you have those moments that validate you and reassure you, and people give you wonderful feedback, and you're on the right track. But it's always, I think, something that is part of the love-hate relationship that I have, at least with writing, is I love writing, but then sometimes it does fill you with doubt, and could you do better, and those kind of things. That's sort of, there's that aspect. I think the other aspect is sometimes writing can be a little bit isolating, as you
Mm.
know, and you have to spend a lot of time. I mean, I've been impressed by how much you've written. I've seen you've had a lot of books published over the years, and I mean, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of time spent editing, not just writing, but the editing process is can be very,
Just
long and
banging your head
torturous.
against the wall takes a while,
Yeah, yeah. So that isolating part of it is challenging, but then I think that's why I love opportunities like this to talk to fellow
Yeah.
writers, and talk about the craft, and you be a part of a community of artists, and that you feel supported and you don't feel alone. And that's nice.
Nobody gets it like other art, like other writers that we could talk about writing all day, every day from morning till night. And when we go to conferences back in the old days, like remember, we would
Yeah.
start talking break of dawn and not stop until the bar shut down. And that's that's a wonderful part. What is your biggest joy? Speaking of wonderful parts, what's your biggest joy in writing?
I love the creative process when I'm feeling inspired, and I am excited to wake up and excited to get to the
Yeah.
computer and start writing, and get immersed in that magical different world that I'm writing about, and those characters. And it's like I'm hanging out with friends, or people that I would love to know, or that I do know because I'm creating
Yeah.
them. But it feels like a total escape from reality.
And it
And I
is
love that.
really.
Yeah, I love that part. I love that part because it's just very hard to describe that experience, but it is a unique kind of experience that I just don't get to feel in any other aspect of my life, and so I treasure it.
That deep flow state that we can sometimes get into, not always. I remember when I used to go to this one cafe, I did a lot of my writing there. And I remember when I would blink, I would look up and I would blink and I would realize that there were people all around me that I had not been seeing for 30 minutes. Even if I'd been staring straight ahead, they had not been there and were there the whole time. And what was my face doing while they were there? Yeah.
It is
Can
wild, and it's like you
yeah.
can time just sort of
Yeah.
flows, like you don't realize, like, what, 2 hours went by, and you're immersed in writing this chapter, and you totally lose track of time. And it's amazing. It's a magical experience when you're in that
It
particular
is.
zone.
And it's also frustrating because I want to feel the flow, but flow by definition, you can only know when you're coming out of it. Oh no, I was in flow and now I'm not. It's like
I
sleep that way.
know.
Oh, I was asleep. Um, can you share a craft tip of any sort with us?
Well, a craft tip, that's a good, always good. I mean, for me, I feel like one of the things I've learned over time that I have found to really appreciate is working in the I used to hate the editing process.
Mm.
I loved to write and the creative process of getting it down on the page, that first draft. And then I just couldn't stand the editing. And I really learned to really appreciate the editing and working with like a good editor um, to polish, a manuscript, to deepen characters and their relationships and their kind of story arcs. So for me, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's a tip so much as a general state of mind, but I mean, for me, it would be like really embracing the editing process. And like, for me, it's been very helpful to be open to the input of a good editor, to really help a story become more nuanced and more
Tell
meaningful.
me, tell me a little bit more about that too, because I think it is so important and so crucial to being a writer. But this state of being open to an editor's suggestions, how do you go about doing that? I will just tell you quickly my method, which is to get the revision letter and immediately decry everything that is on the page, and they're absolutely wrong. And then in the next 48 hours, it usually trickles all in that they're 100% right. And I was 100% wrong. But I need that 48 hours. I have never opened a revision letter and said, oh, yeah, no, you're right. That I got that all wrong. How do you handle being open to revision?
I'm exactly
Really?
like you. I mean, at first glance, I'm like, oh my God, I hate this person. I can't stand it.
This was a
How could
mistake.
how could she do this? How can she do this to me? She doesn't understand me or my characters. And then you're right. You sleep on it. You go back. You think about it. You're like grudgingly start to, admit that some of the feedback might be valid, and that if you could tackle it right, you could make it a better story or a better character, or make a character stronger. And so yeah, it's a process of acceptance. It's almost like you go through the, what is it, the 5 stages of
5
grief,
stages.
in a very compressed the very
Bargaining, denial. Yeah.
right.
I think that's really a good point, though. It is a certain type of grief, because I think that as writers, we will always send our manuscripts out with this stupid hope that says, this is the time they're going to write back and say, I fixed some commas, but otherwise it's great. And that's
Right.
never going to happen. And we have to admit that that is the death of the book we thought we had, but it's the birth of the better book that was meant to be.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I think it's, you have to be working with the right person and have
Yeah.
faith in that. But if you are fortunate enough to do so, then it can be a very enriching process. And I think it's letting go of the ego a little bit. But that's healthy.
It's good practice.
It's
I know
absolutely.
I could always use more of that. What thing in your life affects your writing in a surprising way?
Surprising way. I mean, I think for me, it's family life, of being a husband, being a father. Really, when I was growing up, I always felt like I mentioned to you that I wanted to be a writer. I was writing stories when I was a kid, and they got more complex and longer as I got into high school, and then I got more serious about it in college. But I always thought, okay, I'm going to write novels, and I loved reading, but I didn't feel like I was ready. Like I didn't feel like I had enough life experience. And for some people, the life experience that triggers their readiness for tackling a novel is perhaps, their job or their profession. They go to war. I mean,
Yeah.
they live some amazing, crazy story that has to be told. But for me, I think it was more like the everyday life,
Mm.
the emotional life, of family, and the changing perspective of going from being, the child in the family, to being parent in the family, to being a spouse in the family, and like just kind of coming to better understand the nuances and the meaning, the perspectives of those relationships. That to me, I felt like prepared me or enriched my writing to the point that I thought, okay, I'm ready to put a novel together, and it does surprise me, but I'm very grateful for that.
I think that is just a beautiful, beautiful answer. And to be very honest, I'm always going to pick the book to read that is deep in those ways over the fantastic book about war. Like I'm always going to want to know about the relationships between family members. That's just always going to be my jam. So, okay, speaking of reading, and I know you're still reading, what is the best book that you have read recently, and why did you love it?
Well, kind of my favorite. I've had two favorites in the last year or so, and one was it's called Crooked Hallelujah by Kelly Jo Ford. I don't
What
know
a
if you're
great
familiar.
title. I'm not familiar.
Yeah, so Kelly Jo Ford, she got wonderful critical praise for the book, and it's basically similar to what we were talking about. It centers on family relationships. It's like follows three, I believe it's three, maybe four generations of women that are from the same family, and their kind of chronicles their relationships with each other. And it's really fascinating. I loved it because it gave me, I guess, a glimpse into the life of and relationships of women in a family, like matriarchs and daughters and granddaughters that I would not otherwise perhaps be privy to if I wasn't reading this
Yeah.
amazingly intimate story in a novel. And then it also had very interesting cultural insights as well, because the family was an indigenous, Native American family in Oklahoma and
Ooh,
in parts of Oklahoma and Texas. So kind of
that
gave me a
sounds
glimpse
wonderful.
into a culture that I wanted to learn more about as well. So
That sounds wonderful. That's
yeah.
Crooked Hallelujah. What is the other one?
The other one that I enjoyed a lot is called A Peculiar Kind of Immigrant's Son by an author named Sergio Troncoso. And Sergio is also a writer from the border. He grew up in El Paso, Texas, and he and I have had a nice rapport for a while. He's been a little bit of a mentor, giving some advice here and there. And so I like his work a lot, because when I read his work, I mean, it's one of those where it totally resonates with me, because similar experiences in life, growing up on the border, going up to the Northeast, to the East Coast for our educations, and kind of having this experience of living in multiple worlds throughout our lives.
That's beautiful. Okay, speaking of these multiple worlds and border crossings, can you now give us the logline elevator pitch for Fulgencio and where the book can be found and all of that? I know I'm
the,
putting you on the spot.
the pitch for the Resurrection of
For the
Fulgencio
resurrection,
Ramirez.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it's a magical realism novel. It's really a love story, but it's also about the journey of this son of immigrants growing up on the border, and he kind of simultaneously falls in love with a young woman, as well as the American dream, which she symbolizes. And it kind of spurs him on to make somebody of himself against very difficult odds in the 1950s for a son of impoverished immigrants, which, not much has changed.
Yeah.
It's still tough.
Yeah.
So his story, I think, is inspiring. But then the fact that he's battling this family curse, and he's struggling against some tendencies like machismo and some other things that he tends to undermine himself with, makes it a challenging journey for him. And so the book's available on all the usual platforms: Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, etc. And it was published by Blackstone Publishing, and they're also releasing Valley of Shadows coming in September.
That's exciting. They're a great press. And where can we find you?
So you can find my work and learn more about me at my website, rudyruiz.com. That's RUDYRUIZ.com.
Good job at getting the .com of that.
I know, that was lucky. That was lucky. I got lucky. I wasn't as lucky on Twitter.
Nobody is over there. Yeah. Thank you, Rudy. It has been a delight to talk to you. And I wish you all
likewise
continued success.
Congratulations to you on all your success. I was so
Thank
impressed
you.
when I went to your website, and I was like, wow, that you have such range, that you've written books in so many different styles and genres. So I'm excited to, when you come out with your magical realism novel, please let me know, because I'd like to check it out.
I might hit you up for a blurb. Exactly.
All right. Awesome. I'd be honored.
Thank you, Rudy, so much. And happy writing to you.
All right. Thank you. Likewise.
Bye.
Bye-bye.